Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to share 3 stories from my life. Nothing too grand, just 3 moments that shaped who I am. Let's dive right in. The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of Reed College after just 6 months, but I hung around as a drop-in for another 18 months before I finally left for good. So, why did I drop out? Well, the story actually begins before I was even born. My biological mother was a young, unmarried graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She was adamant that I be raised by college graduates, so everything was set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. But when I arrived, they changed their minds at the last minute. They really wanted a girl. That's when my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night. "We have an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said yes, of course. Later, my biological mother found out that my adoptive mother had never graduated from college and that my father hadn't even finished high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers until my parents promised that I would go to college someday. And that's how it all began. 17 years later, I did go to college, but I naively picked one that was almost as expensive as Stanford. My working-class parents had saved their entire lives, and every penny was going toward my tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I couldn't figure out how college was going to help me find that answer. So, I made the decision to drop out and trust that things would work out. It was terrifying at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Once I dropped out, I stopped taking the required classes that didn't interest me and started sitting in on the ones that did. It wasn't glamorous. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on friends' floors. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food, and every Sunday night I'd walk 7 miles across town to get one good meal a week at the Har Krishna temple. But I loved it. Following my curiosity and intuition led me to experiences that turned out to be priceless later on. Here's an example. Reed College at the time had some of the best calligraphy classes in the country. Every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out, I didn't have to follow the normal curriculum, so I decided to take a calligraphy class. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the space between letters, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, and artistically subtle in a way that science couldn't capture. And I found it fascinating. None of this had any practical application in my life at the time. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. We designed the Mac with beautiful typography, and it became the first computer with multiple typefaces and proportionally spaced fonts. If I had never dropped out, I would have never taken that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the typography they do today. Sometimes, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down, and it has made all the difference in my life. I decided to take a calligraphy class, just out of curiosity. I wanted to learn the art of beautiful writing. In that class, I discovered the world of serif and sans serif typefaces, the intricacies of spacing between letters, and the subtle artistry behind great typography. It was a blend of history and beauty, something science couldn't quite capture. I was captivated by it, even though it seemed completely unrelated to anything practical in my life. At the time, I had no idea how it would ever matter. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, everything I learned in that calligraphy class came rushing back. We poured that knowledge into the Mac, making it the first computer with beautiful typography, multiple typefaces, proportionally spaced fonts, and a level of design that hadn't been seen before. And because Windows later copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have these features if I hadn't stumbled into that class. Looking back, it's clear how those seemingly random dots connected, but at the time, standing in that classroom, I couldn't see how any of it would ever matter. That's the thing about life. You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward. You have to trust that somehow the dots will align in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever it is. Believing that the dots will connect gives you the courage to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the beaten path, and that can make all the difference. My second story is about love and loss. I was fortunate to find what I loved to do early in life. I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked tirelessly, and within a decade, Apple grew from just the two of us into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We had just released our finest creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and I had just turned 30. And then, out of nowhere, I got fired. How do you get fired from a company you started? Well, as Apple grew, we hired someone I thought was incredibly talented to run the company with me. For a while, things went well, but over time, our visions for the future began to clash, and eventually, we had a falling out. When it came down to it, the board of directors sided with him. So, at 30, I was out. Very publicly out. Everything I had worked for, the focus of my entire adult life, was gone. It was devastating. For months, I felt like I had let everyone down. I thought I had dropped the baton, failed the previous generation of entrepreneurs. I met with David Packard and Bob Noyce trying to apologize for how badly I thought I had messed up. I was a public failure, and I even considered leaving Silicon Valley altogether. But slowly, something began to dawn on me. Despite everything, I still loved what I did. Being rejected by Apple hadn't changed that. I was still in love with the work, so I decided to start over. At the time, I didn't realize it, but getting fired from Apple turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me. The weight of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. I was free to explore, to create, to dream. It was the start of a new chapter, one that would lead me to some of the most fulfilling work of my life. Being less sure about everything after getting fired from Apple freed me in a way I hadn't expected. It opened the door to one of the most creative periods of my life. Over the next 5 years, I started a company called Next, another called Pixar, and I fell in love with an incredible woman who would later become my wife. Pixar went on to create the world's first computer-animated feature film, Toy Story, and it's now the most successful animation studio in the world. In a twist of fate, Apple ended up buying Next, and I returned to the company I had co-founded. The technology we developed at Next became the foundation of Apple's revival, and Lorene and I built a beautiful family together. Looking back, I'm certain none of this would have happened if I hadn't been fired from Apple. It was bitter medicine, but sometimes that's exactly what the patient needs. Life has a way of hitting you in the head with a brick when you least expect it. But don't lose faith. What kept me going during those tough times was my love for what I did. You have to find what you love. And that's as true for your work as it is for your relationships. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years go by. So keep searching. Don't settle. My third story is about death. When I was 17, I came across a quote that went something like this: "If you live each day as if it were your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." It stuck with me, and for the past 33 years, I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? Whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever used to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, falls away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There's no reason not to follow your heart. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet, death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that's as it should be, because death is very likely life's greatest invention. It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you. But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. I don't mean to be dramatic, but it's the truth. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice, and most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Stay hungry, stay foolish.